Question 1. Cost-benefit analysis shows that obtaining a Quebec driver's license promptly is beneficial for a new resident of Montreal. Considering the regulations of the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, what is the most appropriate initial step to advise this individual on regarding their driving privileges? Option A. Inform them that they can drive indefinitely with their out-of-province license, as long as it remains valid in its issuing jurisdiction, as Quebec has reciprocal agreements for all out-of-province licenses. Option B. Recommend they obtain a Quebec driver's license as soon as possible, without specifying the exact SOC procedures, as long as they have a valid license from their previous province. Option C. Advise them to immediately consult the official SOC website or visit a service point to understand the process for exchanging their out-of-province license for a Quebec one, ensuring they meet residency and any testing requirements. Option D. Suggest they continue driving with their current out-of-province license until they receive a formal notification from the SOC about their licensing status. The correct answer is C. Advise them to immediately consult the official SOC website or visit a service point to understand the process for exchanging their out-of-province license for a Quebec one, ensuring they meet residency and any testing requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements mandated by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC. A new resident may be eager to drive, but failing to adhere to the proper licensing procedures can lead to legal penalties and compromise road safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance while facilitating the individual's integration into Quebec's transportation system. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves guiding the new resident through the official SOC process for obtaining a Quebec driver's license. This includes advising them to consult the SOC official website or visit a service point to understand the specific requirements for individuals moving from another province, which typically involves exchanging their existing license for a Quebec one after meeting residency criteria and potentially undergoing specific tests if their previous license is not directly transferable. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the Quebec Highway Safety Code and SOC regulations, which govern vehicle operation and licensing within the province. Adhering to these official procedures ensures legal compliance and promotes road safety by verifying the driver's competency according to Quebec standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. Advising the individual to simply continue driving with their out-of-province license indefinitely without verifying its validity or initiating the exchange process with the SOC is a regulatory failure. This bypasses the legal requirement to be licensed by the province in which one resides and operates a vehicle, potentially leading to fines and invalidation of insurance. Suggesting they can drive until they receive a notice from the SOC is also incorrect. The onus is on the driver to proactively comply with licensing laws, not to wait for official intervention. Furthermore, recommending they obtain a Quebec license without confirming their eligibility or understanding the specific steps for interprovincial transfers, such as potential knowledge or road tests, could lead to incomplete or invalid licensing, posing a risk to themselves and others on the road. Professional reasoning. Professionals assisting new residents should adopt a proactive and informative approach. This involves understanding the relevant provincial regulations, in this case, Quebec's Highway Safety Code and SOC policies, and clearly communicating these requirements to the individual. The decision-making process should prioritize legal compliance and public safety. This means guiding the individual towards official channels and ensuring they understand the steps necessary to become legally licensed. If unsure about specific SOC procedures, the professional should direct the individual to the SOC for definitive guidance rather than providing potentially inaccurate advice. Question 2. The performance metrics show a significant increase in the failure rate for novice drivers on their road tests in Quebec over the past year. Considering the mandate of the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec SOC to ensure road safety, what is the most appropriate initial step to address this trend? Option A. Recommend that the SOC increase the number of road test attempts permitted for novice drivers. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the SOC road test evaluation criteria and the training provided to its examiners to ensure consistency and adherence to safe driving standards. Option C. Immediately instruct road test examiners to be more lenient in their evaluations to reduce the failure rate. Option D. Conclude that the primary cause is the inadequacy of private driving school instruction and suggest stricter regulations for those schools. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the SOC road test evaluation criteria and the training provided to its examiners to ensure consistency and adherence to safe driving standards. Explanation: the performance metrics show a concerning trend in the number of novice drivers failing their road tests in Quebec. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an understanding of how to interpret data to identify potential systemic issues affecting driver safety and licensing, rather than just individual driver performance. Careful judgment is required to move beyond simply noting the failure rate and to investigate the underlying causes. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of the road test evaluation criteria and examiner training protocols in Quebec. This is correct because it directly addresses the core components of the licensing process. By examining the evaluation criteria, one can determine if they are clear, objective, and appropriately reflect safe driving practices as mandated by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec (SOC). Similarly, reviewing examiner training ensures that all examiners are applying the criteria consistently and fairly, adhering to SOC guidelines for assessing competency. This proactive, systemic review is ethically sound as it prioritizes public safety by ensuring that only competent drivers are licensed, and it aligns with the SOC mandate to regulate road safety. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume that the examiners are being overly strict or lenient without further investigation. This is professionally unacceptable because it jumps to conclusions without evidence and could lead to unwarranted criticism of examiners or a failure to identify genuine flaws in the testing process. It bypasses the need for objective data analysis and adherence to SOC procedural guidelines. Another incorrect approach is to suggest that the failure rate is solely attributable to the quality of driving instruction provided by private schools. While driving instruction is a factor, the road test itself is the SOC direct measure of competency. Blaming external factors without first scrutinizing the internal testing mechanisms is a failure to uphold professional responsibility for the integrity of the licensing process. A third incorrect approach would be to propose a significant increase in the number of road test attempts allowed for novice drivers without addressing the reasons for failure. This is professionally unsound as it prioritizes throughput over safety and competency, potentially leading to more unqualified drivers on Quebec's roads. It fails to align with the SOC objective of ensuring safe driving. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with data analysis, followed by a thorough review of relevant regulations and internal procedures. This involves forming hypotheses about potential causes, gathering evidence to support or refute these hypotheses, and then proposing evidence-based solutions that align with the governing body's mandate and ethical obligations. In this case, the focus must remain on the SOC framework for driver testing and licensing. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that when proposing a significant alteration to a major intersection in Montreal, Quebec, what is the most crucial factor to consider to ensure compliance with provincial road safety standards and driver well-being? Option A. A projection of the potential increase in traffic throughput and reduction in vehicle queuing times at the intersection. Option B. A detailed analysis of how the proposed changes might affect driver behavior, reaction times, and adherence to the Highway Safety Code of Quebec, with a specific focus on potential new hazards or points of confusion for drivers. Option C. A general assessment of traffic flow improvements based on common engineering practices, assuming drivers will adapt to new signage. Option D. A cost-benefit analysis that prioritizes the most economical solution for the city, even if it introduces minor complexities for drivers. The correct answer is B. A detailed analysis of how the proposed changes might affect driver behavior, reaction times, and adherence to the Highway Safety Code of Quebec, with a specific focus on potential new hazards or points of confusion for drivers. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows that assessing the impact of a proposed road modification on driver behavior and safety in Quebec requires a thorough understanding of the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec (SOC) regulations and the Highway Safety Code of Quebec. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the potential benefits of a road modification, e.g., improved traffic flow, against the critical need to maintain or enhance driver safety and compliance with provincial laws. A hasty or incomplete assessment could lead to unintended consequences, increased accident rates, or noncompliance with SOC standards, potentially resulting in legal repercussions for the project proponents and risks for the public. The best approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that prioritizes driver safety and adherence to the Highway Safety Code of Quebec. This includes conducting detailed traffic studies, analyzing potential changes in driver behavior, e.g., speed, lane changes, reaction times, under the new configuration, and consulting SOC guidelines for road design and safety. The assessment must also consider the specific driving conditions prevalent in Quebec, such as seasonal variations in weather and road surface. This proactive and safety-centric methodology is correct because it directly aligns with the SOC mandate to ensure the safety of Quebec road users and promotes responsible infrastructure development that respects provincial traffic laws. An approach that focuses solely on improving traffic flow without adequately considering the potential for increased driver confusion or risk of accidents is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the ethical obligation to prioritize public safety and violates the spirit, if not the letter, of the Highway Safety Code of Quebec, which emphasizes accident prevention. Another unacceptable approach would be to rely on general traffic engineering principles without specific reference to Quebec's unique regulatory environment and SOC requirements. This overlooks the specific legal obligations and safety standards mandated by the province, potentially leading to a design that is not legally compliant or safe for Quebec drivers. Finally, an approach that minimizes the assessment of driver behavior changes, assuming drivers will adapt without issue, is negligent. It fails to acknowledge the complexities of human factors in driving and the potential for unexpected negative outcomes, thereby neglecting the duty of care owed to the public. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant Quebec provincial regulations, particularly those from the SOC and the Highway Safety Code. This should be followed by a thorough risk assessment, considering potential impacts on driver behavior and safety. The process must involve data collection, expert analysis, and consultation with relevant authorities. Finally, the decision should be based on a clear demonstration that the proposed modification will not compromise driver safety and will remain in full compliance with all applicable Quebec laws and SOC guidelines. Question 4. Analysis of a complex intersection in Montreal, Quebec. During moderate traffic, a driver approaches a green light. They observe a vehicle to their left that has stopped, and a pedestrian is in the crosswalk on the far side of the intersection. What is the most prudent and legally compliant course of action for the driver to take? Option A. Honk the horn to alert the pedestrian and then proceed through the intersection. Option B. Wait for the stopped vehicle to their left to move before proceeding, regardless of the pedestrian's position. Option C. Proceed through the intersection immediately, as the green light grants them the right-of-way. Option D. Proceed cautiously through the intersection after ensuring the pedestrian has cleared the crosswalk and the stopped vehicle to the left is not intending to proceed into their path. The correct answer is D. Proceed cautiously through the intersection after ensuring the pedestrian has cleared the crosswalk and the stopped vehicle to the left is not intending to proceed into their path. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to assess a complex, dynamic situation involving multiple road users and potential hazards, demanding immediate and accurate judgment under pressure. The driver must prioritize safety and adhere to Quebec's specific traffic laws, which govern right-of-way, speed, and signaling in such intersections. Failure to correctly interpret the situation and react appropriately can lead to accidents, injuries, and legal consequences. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive assessment of all immediate factors, including the presence of other vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, traffic signal, and road conditions before proceeding. This driver should prioritize yielding to any vehicle or pedestrian already in the intersection or approaching in a manner that indicates they have the right-of-way according to the Quebec Highway Safety Code. Specifically, the driver must observe and yield to traffic on the main road and any pedestrians crossing. This approach aligns with the fundamental principle of defensive driving and the legal obligation to ensure a safe passage, as mandated by the Quebec Highway Safety Code, which emphasizes due care and attention to avoid collisions. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding without confirming the intersection is clear, and that no other road user has the right-of-way is a direct violation of the Quebec Highway Safety Code's provisions on safe intersection passage and yielding. This demonstrates a failure to exercise due care and attention, creating an immediate risk of collision. Assuming other drivers will yield, even if the driver has a green light, is a dangerous assumption that disregards the unpredictable nature of traffic and the potential for other drivers to disregard traffic signals or rules. This approach neglects the driver's responsibility to ensure their own safety and the safety of others, which is a core tenet of safe driving in Quebec. Focusing solely on the green light without considering other road users, such as pedestrians or cyclists who may be completing their crossing, is a partial and unsafe assessment. The Quebec Highway Safety Code requires drivers to be aware of all road users and to yield when necessary, regardless of their own signal status, to prevent accidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process when approaching intersections. This involves scanning for hazards well in advance, identifying all potential conflicts: vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, understanding and applying the relevant traffic laws, e.g., right-of-way rules, signal interpretations, and making a proactive decision to proceed only when it is demonstrably safe to do so, prioritizing the avoidance of any potential collision. Question 5. The review process indicates that you are approaching an intersection in Quebec where a prominent red octagonal sign with white lettering is clearly visible. What is the legally mandated and safest course of action to take upon encountering this sign? Option A. Bring your vehicle to a complete stop at the marked stop line or before entering the intersection, then proceed only when it is safe to do so. Option B. Assume that if the intersection appears clear, a full stop is not required and you may proceed with caution. Option C. Slow down significantly and proceed cautiously through the intersection if no other vehicles are immediately visible. Option D. Continue through the intersection without stopping, relying on your assessment of oncoming traffic. The correct answer is A. Bring your vehicle to a complete stop at the marked stop line or before entering the intersection, then proceed only when it is safe to do so. Explanation. The review process indicates a need to assess the understanding of road signage and their implications for driver behavior in Quebec. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to not only recognize a specific sign, but also to understand its immediate and critical impact on their driving actions, especially in a potentially hazardous situation. Misinterpreting or ignoring such a sign can lead to severe consequences, including accidents, fines, and demerit points, all of which are governed by the Quebec Highway Safety Code. Careful judgment is required to prioritize safety and adherence to traffic laws above all else. Correct approach involves immediately and safely bringing the vehicle to a complete stop before the designated line or intersection, as mandated by the alert stop sign. This action is directly aligned with Article 131 of the Quebec Highway Safety Code, which stipulates that a driver encountering a stop sign must stop their vehicle at the marked stop line or, if none is present, before entering the intersection or crossing the pedestrian crosswalk. This ensures that the driver can assess traffic and pedestrian movement before proceeding, thereby preventing potential collisions and ensuring the safety of all road users. This approach prioritizes regulatory compliance and accident prevention. An incorrect approach would be to slow down and proceed cautiously without coming to a complete stop. This fails to comply with the explicit requirement of the alert sign and Article 131 of the Quebec Highway Safety Code. It demonstrates a disregard for traffic regulations and significantly increases the risk of an accident, as the driver has not fully assessed the situation from a stationary position. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that if no other vehicles are present, a full stop is unnecessary. This is a dangerous assumption that violates the spirit and letter of traffic laws. The purpose of a stop sign is to enforce a mandatory halt regardless of immediate traffic condition, allowing for a comprehensive assessment of the intersection. Ignoring this rule, even when seemingly safe, undermines the systematic approach to road safety designed by traffic authorities. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to proceed through the intersection without stopping, believing that the sign is merely a suggestion or that the driver's judgment of traffic flow is sufficient. This demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of traffic control devices and a serious disregard for the Quebec Highway Safety Code. Such behavior poses a direct threat to public safety and is a clear indicator of an unqualified driver. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and adherence to traffic laws as the primary objective. This involves recognizing all traffic control devices, understanding their specific meaning and required action according to the Quebec Highway Safety Code, and executing those actions safely and without exception. When in doubt, always err on the side of caution and strict compliance with the law. Question 6. Performance analysis shows that a vehicle is observed drifting slightly within its lane on a Quebec highway. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for an enforcement officer? Option A. Immediately initiate a traffic stop, assuming the driver may be impaired or otherwise unsafe due to the lane drifting. Option B. Observe the vehicle's behavior further to determine if a specific violation of the Quebec Highway Safety Code is occurring before initiating any enforcement action. Option C. Ignore the lane drifting, as it is a minor deviation and not a significant safety concern. Option D. Attempt to signal the driver to pull over using non-standard methods like flashing headlights to alert them to their lane position. The correct answer is B. Observe the vehicle's behavior further to determine if a specific violation of the Quebec Highway Safety Code is occurring before initiating any enforcement action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need to address a potential safety hazard with the legal and ethical obligations to follow established procedures and respect individual rights. A driver's immediate reaction to a perceived infraction might be to take punitive action, but this must be tempered by the understanding of due process and the specific regulations governing traffic enforcement in Quebec. Misjudging the situation could lead to an unwarranted accusation, a violation of the driver's rights, or a failure to properly address a genuine safety concern. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a measured and evidence-based approach. This means observing the vehicle's behavior to confirm a violation of the Quebec Highway Safety Code, such as erratic driving or a clear traffic infraction, before initiating any enforcement action. If a violation is confirmed, the next step is to safely and legally stop the vehicle to address the infraction according to established protocols. This approach is correct because it aligns with the principles of due process, ensuring that enforcement actions are based on observed violations of law, not on assumptions or incomplete information. It upholds the integrity of the enforcement process and respects the rights of all road users. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately assume the driver is impaired or dangerous based solely on a single observation of a vehicle drifting slightly within its lane, without further evidence of erratic or unsafe driving. This is a failure to gather sufficient evidence and can lead to an unjustified stop, potentially causing undue stress and inconvenience to the driver and misallocating enforcement resources. It violates the principle that enforcement actions must be predicated on observed violations of the Quebec Highway Safety Code. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the vehicle's behavior entirely, even if it appears to be drifting, under the assumption that it is not a significant safety risk. This is a failure to act on a potential hazard. While not every drift is a violation, a pattern of such behavior could indicate a driver who is distracted, fatigued, or experiencing a medical issue, all of which pose a risk to public safety. This approach neglects the professional responsibility to ensure road safety and could be seen as a dereliction of duty if a subsequent incident occurs. A further incorrect approach is to attempt to signal the driver to pull over through non-standard means, such as flashing headlights repeatedly or honking excessively, without initiating a formal traffic stop. This can create confusion and potentially escalate the situation, leading to unpredictable behavior from the driver. It deviates from the standardized and legally recognized procedures for traffic stops in Quebec, which are designed for clarity and safety for both the officer and the driver. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes observation, evidence gathering, and adherence to established legal and procedural guidelines. This involves 1. Observe and assess. Continuously monitor the vehicle's behavior to identify specific violations of the Quebec Highway Safety Code. 2. Corroborate evidence. Gather sufficient objective evidence to support any enforcement action. 3. Follow protocol. If a violation is confirmed, initiate a safe and legal traffic stop using approved methods. 4. Communicate clearly. Once stopped, communicate with the driver in a professional and respectful manner, explaining the reason for the stop. 5. Document thoroughly. Record all observations and actions taken. This systematic approach ensures fairness, legality, and effectiveness in maintaining road safety. Question 7. Compliance review shows that a representative processing driver's license applications in Quebec has encountered an applicant whose previous driving history is unclear from the initial documentation provided. To ensure the application is processed accurately and in accordance with provincial regulations, what is the most appropriate and compliant method for verifying the applicant's driving record? Option A. Utilize the official inquiry channels provided by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, to request and verify the applicant's driving history. Option B. Contact a personal acquaintance who works within the SOC to discreetly inquire about the applicant's file and driving history. Option C. Search public social media profiles for any information that might corroborate the applicant's driving history. Option D. Access the applicant's driving record from a former employer's archived system, as the employer previously had legitimate access for employment verification purposes. The correct answer is A. Utilize the official inquiry channels provided by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, to request and verify the applicant's driving history. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the strict legal and ethical obligations surrounding the handling of personal data, specifically in the context of a driver's license application in Quebec. The temptation to expedite a process by accessing information outside of authorized channels is present, but doing so carries significant risks of violating privacy laws and professional conduct standards. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions are compliant and ethically sound. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves adhering strictly to the established procedures for obtaining information related to a driver's license application in Quebec. This means utilizing the official channels provided by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, for verifying applicant details. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the principles of data protection and privacy enshrined in Quebec's Act, respecting the protection of personal information in the private sector, and the Highway Safety Code. These regulations mandate that personal information can only be accessed and used for authorized purposes through legitimate means. By following official SOC procedures, the individual ensures they are acting within the legal framework, respecting the applicant's privacy rights, and maintaining professional integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. Accessing the applicant's driving record directly from a former employer's archived system, even if the employer previously had legitimate access for employment verification, is a regulatory and ethical failure. This is because the authorization for access is typically limited to the specific purpose for which it was granted, employment screening, and does not extend to a new, unrelated purpose, driver's license application processing, without explicit consent or a new legal basis. This action likely violates the principles of purpose limitation and lawful collection of personal information. Contacting a personal acquaintance who works within the SOC to inquire about the applicant's file is also a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses all established security protocols and authorized access routes. It constitutes an improper disclosure of personal information and an abuse of professional position or influence. Such an action breaches confidentiality requirements and could lead to disciplinary action and legal penalties under Quebec privacy legislation. Searching public social media profiles for information that might corroborate the applicant's driving history is an insufficient and potentially misleading approach. While social media is public, using it to infer or confirm details relevant to a formal application process is not a sanctioned method for data verification. It lacks the reliability and legal standing of official records and could lead to decisions based on inaccurate or incomplete information, thereby failing to meet the standards of due diligence required for official applications. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Quebec dealing with driver's license applications must adopt a decision-making process rooted in legal compliance and ethical responsibility. This involves 1. Identifying the specific regulatory framework governing the process, e.g., Highway Safety Code, Act respecting the protection of personal information in the private sector. 2. Understanding the authorized purposes for accessing personal information. 3. Utilizing only official and sanctioned channels for data verification. 4. Prioritizing data privacy and confidentiality at all stages. 5. Seeking clarification or guidance from supervisory bodies or legal counsel if unsure about the legality or ethicality of an action. Question 8. Investigation of a vehicle exhibiting slightly inconsistent speed and minor lane drifting on a Quebec highway prompts a police officer to consider their next course of action. What is the most appropriate and legally sound approach for the officer to take in this specific Quebec context? Option A. Approach the driver at the next traffic light to inquire about their sobriety. Option B. Ignore the observed behavior as it does not definitively indicate impairment. Option C. Continue observing the vehicle for a sustained period to gather objective evidence of erratic driving that clearly violates Quebec's Highway Safety Code before considering intervention. Option D. Immediately initiate a traffic stop based on the subjective feeling that the driver might be impaired. The correct answer is C. Continue observing the vehicle for a sustained period to gather objective evidence of erratic driving that clearly violates Quebec's Highway Safety Code before considering intervention. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to assess a situation involving potential impairment and to make a decision that prioritizes public safety while respecting individual rights. The driver must balance their immediate perception with the legal standards for impaired driving in Quebec, understanding that a subjective feeling is not sufficient grounds for immediate action, but can necessitate further observation and caution. The professional responsibility is to act in a manner that prevents harm without unjustly accusing or inconveniencing another road user. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves observing the vehicle's behavior for a sustained period to gather objective evidence of erratic driving that clearly violates Quebec's Highway Safety Code. This approach is correct because it aligns with the legal threshold for intervention. Quebec law requires observable signs of impairment or dangerous driving before a police officer can initiate a traffic stop or demand a breath sample. Simply suspecting impairment based on a brief observation is insufficient. This method ensures that actions are based on concrete evidence of a potential safety risk, thereby upholding both public safety and the rights of the driver being observed. It allows for a more informed and legally defensible decision. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately initiate a traffic stop based solely on a subjective feeling that the other driver might be impaired, without observing any specific erratic driving behavior. This fails to meet the legal standard for reasonable suspicion in Quebec, which requires observable indicators of impairment or dangerous driving. Such an action could be considered an unwarranted stop, potentially leading to a complaint against the officer. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the observed behavior entirely, even if it appears concerning. While not every unusual driving maneuver indicates impairment, a pattern of erratic driving warrants attention. Failing to investigate a potentially dangerous situation could be seen as a dereliction of duty, as the primary role of law enforcement is to ensure road safety. A third incorrect approach is to approach the driver at a traffic light and directly question them about their sobriety without any prior observation of their driving. This is intrusive and lacks the necessary foundation of reasonable suspicion. It bypasses the established legal procedures for addressing suspected impaired driving and could be perceived as harassment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Quebec should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes observable evidence and adherence to the Highway Safety Code. This involves a continuous assessment of a situation, gathering objective data, and acting only when legal thresholds for intervention are met. When encountering potentially impaired drivers, the process should be: 1. Observe for specific objective signs of erratic driving, e.g., weaving, sudden braking, excessive speed variations. 2. If such signs are present and persistent, initiate a lawful traffic stop. 3. During the stop, observe further indicators of impairment and follow established procedures for breathalyzer demands if reasonable suspicion solidifies. This systematic approach ensures both effective enforcement of impaired driving laws and respect for individual rights. Question 9. Comparative studies suggest that effective driver training in Quebec emphasizes proactive safety measures. During a road test, an applicant approaches an intersection with a marked crosswalk. A pedestrian has already entered the crosswalk and is proceeding across the applicant's lane of travel. The applicant is approaching at a moderate speed. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant action for the applicant to take? Option A. Come to a complete stop at a safe distance before the crosswalk and wait for the pedestrian to fully clear the lane. Option B. Proceed cautiously into the crosswalk, assuming the pedestrian will move quickly. Option C. Stop just before the crosswalk but then inch forward as the pedestrian passes. Option D. Honk the horn to encourage the pedestrian to speed up their crossing. The correct answer is A. Come to a complete stop at a safe distance before the crosswalk and wait for the pedestrian to fully clear the lane. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only knowledge of Quebec's traffic laws, but also the ability to apply them in a practical, safety-conscious manner. The examiner must assess the applicant's judgment and decision-making under real-world driving conditions, which can be unpredictable. A failure to correctly interpret and react to a complex traffic situation, such as the one described, could have serious safety implications. Careful judgment is required to balance adherence to rules with the need for defensive driving and anticipating the actions of other road users. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing the safety of all road users and strictly adhering to the Quebec Highway Safety Code. This means yielding the right-of-way to the pedestrian who has already entered the crosswalk and is proceeding across the lane. The driver must come to a complete stop at a safe distance before the crosswalk, allowing the pedestrian to cross unimpeded. This approach is correct because Section 407 of the Quebec Highway Safety Code mandates that drivers must yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk. Ethical considerations also demand a proactive approach to pedestrian safety, recognizing their vulnerability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding cautiously into the crosswalk while the pedestrian is still present. This is a failure to yield the right-of-way as required by law and demonstrates a lack of respect for pedestrian safety. Creates a dangerous situation where the driver might misjudge the pedestrian's speed or intentions, leading to a potential collision. Another incorrect approach is to honk the horn to alert the pedestrian to hurry. This is not only discourteous, but also potentially intimidating and unsafe. It does not absolve the driver of their responsibility to yield and could cause the pedestrian to react unpredictably, increasing the risk of an accident. The Quebec Highway Safety Code does not permit the use of the horn in such a manner to pressure pedestrians. A further incorrect approach is to stop abruptly just before the crosswalk, but then inch forward as the pedestrian passes, assuming they will move quickly enough. This is still a failure to provide adequate space and a clear path for the pedestrian. It shows a lack of commitment to yielding completely and can create a feeling of being rushed or threatened for the pedestrian. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the immediate hazard or situation pedestrian in crosswalk. 2. Recalling relevant legal obligations, Quebec Highway Safety Code, Section 407. 3. Assessing the safest course of action that minimizes risk to all parties. 4. Executing that action decisively and responsibly. In this case, the safest and legally compliant action is a complete stop and yielding. Question 10. The investigation demonstrates that a new driver in Quebec, holding a probationary license, has incurred 2 speeding tickets and 1 infraction for failing to stop at a stop sign within the last 2 years. The speeding tickets each carry 4 demerit points, and the failure to stop infraction carries 3 demerit points. Under Quebec's Highway Safety Code, driver with a probationary license is allowed a maximum of 4 demerit points before facing a license suspension. If the driver also had a previous infraction from 3 years ago that resulted in 2 demerit points, how many demerit points does the driver currently have? And will they face a license suspension based on their current record? Option A. The driver currently has 7 demerit points and will not face a license suspension. Option B. The driver currently has 11 demerit points and will not face a license suspension. Option C. The driver currently has 11 demerit points and will face a license suspension. Option D. The driver currently has 7 demerit points and will face a license suspension. The correct answer is C. The driver currently has 11 demerit points and will face a license suspension. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a new driver in Quebec has accumulated demerit points and is facing potential license suspension. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires a precise understanding of Quebec's graduated licensing system and its associated penalties, specifically the thresholds for demerit points at different stages, the driver's ability to continue driving, and the financial implications of potential sanctions necessitate a careful and accurate calculation of their current demerit point, standing relative to the legal limits. The correct approach involves accurately calculating the total demerit points accumulated and comparing this sum to the specific demerit point, limits applicable to the driver's current licensing stage under Quebec's Highway Safety Code. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal requirements and consequences outlined by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC. The SOC regulations clearly define the number of demerit points that can lead to sanctions, and adherence to these specific thresholds is paramount for maintaining a valid driver's license. For instance, a driver in the probationary stage has a lower demerit point limit than a fully licensed driver. An incorrect approach would be to estimate the demerit points or to rely on general knowledge of demerit point systems without consulting the specific regulations for Quebec. This is professionally unacceptable because it risks misinterpreting the driver's status, potentially leading to a false sense of security or unnecessary panic. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the number of infractions without considering the point value assigned to each infraction under Quebec law, or to assume that all infractions carry the same penalty. This fails to acknowledge the graduated nature of penalties and the specific point system in place. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the specific jurisdiction and its relevant regulatory body, in this case, Quebec and the SOC. 2. Consulting the official documentation for the graduated licensing system and demerit point regulations. 3. Accurately tallying demerit points based on the specific infractions and their assigned values. 4. Comparing the total demerit points against the applicable thresholds for the driver's current license class. 5. Advising the driver based on a precise understanding of the legal consequences. Question 11. Assessment of a driver's readiness to operate a motor vehicle on Quebec's roadways, considering personal well-being and adherence to provincial traffic laws. What is the most responsible course of action when a driver feels significantly tired after a long day of work and needs to travel a short distance home? Option A. Drive the short distance home with the intention of pulling over if the fatigue becomes too severe. Option B. Drive the short distance home while attempting to stay alert by playing loud music or opening the windows. Option C. Postpone the drive until feeling fully rested and alert. Option D. Drive the short distance home, believing the fatigue is manageable and the distance is minimal. The correct answer is C. Postpone the drive until feeling fully rested and alert. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for transportation with the legal and safety obligations of operating a vehicle in Quebec. The driver's personal circumstances, feeling tired, directly impact their ability to drive safely, and ignoring this could lead to serious consequences for themselves and others. The core of the challenge lies in recognizing the subjective nature of impairment and prioritizing safety over personal convenience or perceived urgency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves acknowledging the driver's subjective feeling of tiredness as a significant indicator of potential impairment and making the responsible decision to postpone the drive. This approach aligns with the fundamental principles of road safety enshrined in Quebec's Highway Safety Code, which implicitly requires drivers to be in a fit condition to operate a vehicle. The code emphasizes the driver's responsibility to ensure they are not impaired by fatigue, alcohol, or any other factor that could compromise their control of the vehicle. Choosing to wait until feeling fully rested is a direct application of this principle, prioritizing the safety of oneself and other road users. Incorrect approaches analysis. Choosing to drive despite feeling tired, believing that the fatigue is manageable or that the short distance negates the risk, is a failure to uphold the duty of care. This approach disregards the unpredictable nature of fatigue-induced impairment, which can manifest suddenly and severely. It also contravenes the spirit, if not the letter, of Quebec's Highway Safety Code by potentially operating a vehicle in an unsafe condition. Attempting to mitigate fatigue by engaging in distracting activities like listening to loud music or opening windows is an inadequate and potentially dangerous strategy. These actions do not address the underlying physiological need for rest and can, in fact, exacerbate fatigue by creating a false sense of alertness. This approach fails to recognize that true alertness comes from adequate sleep, not superficial stimulation. Driving and intending to pull over if fatigue becomes overwhelming is a reactive and risky strategy. It places other road users in potential danger during the period of impaired driving before the driver recognizes the need to stop. This approach demonstrates a lack of proactive responsibility and prioritizes the immediate desire to drive over the safety of the road environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any situation involving potential risk must adopt a proactive and precautionary approach. When assessing personal capacity to perform a task that impacts public safety, such as driving, the decision-making process should involve 1. Self-assessment of current condition, honestly evaluating physical and mental state for any signs of impairment. 2. Understanding legal and ethical obligations, recognizing the specific regulations and ethical duties related to the activity. 3. Prioritizing safety, making decisions that unequivocally minimize risk to oneself and others. 4. Seeking alternatives. If unable to perform safely, identifying and utilizing alternative solutions. Question 12. The audit findings indicate that during a simulated lane change maneuver on a Quebec roadway, a driver primarily relied on their rearview mirror to assess traffic conditions. Considering the Quebec Highway Safety Code, which of the following best reflects the legally required and safest approach to executing a lane change? Option A. Check only the side mirror on the side of the intended lane change, assuming the rearview mirror is sufficient for general awareness. Option B. Rely solely on the rearview mirror to gauge the distance and speed of vehicles behind. Option C. Actively check the rearview mirror, the side mirror on the side of the intended lane change, and perform a head check to confirm the blind spot is clear. Option D. Make a quick glance in all mirrors, assuming that if no immediate danger is apparent, the lane change is safe. The correct answer is C. Actively check the rearview mirror, the side mirror on the side of the intended lane change, and perform a head check to confirm the blind spot is clear. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to Quebec's Highway Safety Code concerning the proper use of mirrors. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to accurately assess their knowledge of specific traffic laws and apply them to a practical driving situation, even when under the pressure of a test. The driver must demonstrate not just theoretical understanding, but also the ability to translate that understanding into safe driving practices. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between common driving habits and legally mandated procedures. The best professional practice involves demonstrating a comprehensive understanding of the Quebec Highway Safety Code by actively checking all mirrors, rear view and side mirrors, before initiating a lane change. This approach is correct because Section 326 of the Quebec Highway Safety Code mandates that a driver must ensure the maneuver can be performed safely and without interfering with other traffic. This includes a thorough visual check of all blind spots and surrounding traffic, which is achieved by using all mirrors. This proactive and thorough checking demonstrates a commitment to safety and compliance with provincial law. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the rearview mirror. This is professionally unacceptable because it fails to address potential blind spots that the side mirrors and a head check are designed to cover, directly contravening the spirit and intent of Section 326 of the Quebec Highway Safety Code, which emphasizes ensuring the maneuver is safe and does not impede other traffic. Another incorrect approach would be to only check the side mirror on the side of the lane change. This is professionally unacceptable as it neglects the rearview mirror, which provides crucial information about traffic approaching from behind, and the other side mirror, which might reveal vehicles in adjacent lanes that could be affected by the maneuver. This incomplete check is a direct violation of the comprehensive safety requirement stipulated in the Quebec Highway Safety Code. A further incorrect approach would be to assume no other vehicles are present based on a quick glance. This is professionally unacceptable because it demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to conduct a proper assessment of the surrounding traffic, as required by law. The Quebec Highway Safety Code requires an active and thorough check, not a cursory assumption. The professional reasoning framework for similar situations involves prioritizing safety and legal compliance above all else. Drivers should always err on the side of caution, conduct thorough checks, and be able to articulate the legal basis for their actions. When in doubt, drivers should seek clarification or practice the correct procedure until it becomes second nature. The goal is to internalize safe driving practices that align with provincial regulations. Question 13. Regulatory review indicates that a driving instructor in Quebec has observed a learner driver exhibiting signs of potential impairment, such as slow reaction times and difficulty maintaining lane position, during a supervised driving session. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for the instructor to take immediately? Option A. Allow the learner to drive home alone after advising them to be cautious. Option B. Immediately cease the driving lesson and ensure the learner driver does not operate the vehicle further. Option C. Continue the lesson with heightened supervision, assuming the learner can still manage safely. Option D. Dismiss the learner's condition as minor and proceed with the lesson as planned, with a brief verbal warning. The correct answer is B. Immediately cease the driving lesson and ensure the learner driver does not operate the vehicle further. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Quebec who has identified a potential impairment in a learner driver. The core difficulty lies in balancing the learner's immediate desire to practice with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety and adhering to Quebec's strict road safety regulations. A driving instructor must exercise sound judgment to prevent potentially dangerous situations without unfairly penalizing a learner, all while operating within the legal framework. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately ceasing the lesson and ensuring the learner driver does not operate the vehicle. This approach directly addresses the immediate safety risk. Quebec's Highway Safety Code, Code de la Sécurité Routière, mandates that all drivers, including learners, must be in a fit condition to drive. Allowing a potentially impaired individual to operate a vehicle, even under supervision, would violate this fundamental principle and could lead to severe consequences, including accidents and legal repercussions for both the learner and the instructor. Ethically, the instructor has a duty of care to the learner, other road users, and themselves, which prioritizes safety above all else. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves continuing the lesson with increased supervision, assuming the learner can still manage. This is a significant regulatory failure as it disregards the potential for impaired judgment and reaction times, directly contravening the spirit and letter of the Highway Safety Code regarding fitness to drive. It also represents an ethical lapse by prioritizing the continuation of the lesson over the safety of all involved. Another incorrect approach is to allow the learner to drive home alone after advising them to be careful. This is a critical failure to uphold the instructor's duty of care and a direct violation of the Highway Safety Code. The instructor cannot delegate the responsibility for ensuring the learner is fit to drive. This action could lead to an accident, with the instructor facing legal and professional sanctions. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the learner's condition as minor and proceed with the lesson as planned, perhaps with a brief verbal warning. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a disregard for the potential severity of impairment. Quebec's regulations are designed to prevent even minor risks from escalating, and this approach fails to meet that standard, potentially endangering the public. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should follow a clear decision-making process. 1. Prioritize immediate safety. If there is any doubt about a driver's fitness, stop the operation of the vehicle. 2. Consult relevant regulations. Understand the specific legal requirements of the jurisdiction, in this case, Quebec's Highway Safety Code, regarding driver fitness and instructor responsibilities. 3. Act ethically. Uphold the duty of care to all parties. 4. Document the situation. Keep a record of observations and actions taken. 5. Communicate clearly. Inform the learner of the decision and the reasons behind it, offering appropriate alternatives or support. Question 14. Consider a scenario where, during a driver's license application process in Quebec, an applicant appears hesitant and confused when asked about their medical history. What is the most appropriate and ethically sound method for the examiner to proceed with gathering the necessary information? Option A. Inform the applicant that answering these questions is mandatory and that failure to do so will result in the immediate denial of their application, without providing further context. Option B. Proceed with the questions without further explanation, assuming the applicant understands the necessity of providing this information for their license application. Option C. Clearly explain to the applicant the purpose of the medical questions and how the information is used by the SOC to assess their fitness to drive, ensuring they understand their rights and the process. Option D. Vaguely state that the questions are for the license and that they must be answered to complete the application. The correct answer is C. Clearly explain to the applicant the purpose of the medical questions and how the information is used by the SOC to assess their fitness to drive, ensuring they understand their rights and the process. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and legal obligations to protect a vulnerable individual's privacy and ensure their informed consent. A driver's license applicant, especially one who may be experiencing distress or confusion, has a right to understand what information is being collected and why. The examiner must act with integrity and adhere strictly to the regulations set forth by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Quebec, SOC, regarding the collection and use of personal information. Failure to do so can lead to a breach of privacy, erosion of public trust, and potential legal repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly and concisely explaining to the applicant, in plain language, the purpose of the questions regarding their medical history and how this information is used by the SOC to assess their fitness to drive. This approach respects the applicant's autonomy and right to privacy. It aligns with the SOC mandate to ensure road safety, while also upholding the principles of data protection and informed consent as outlined in Quebec's privacy legislation. By providing this transparency, the examiner builds trust and facilitates a more cooperative and ethical information gathering process. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with questioning without any explanation, assuming the applicant understands the necessity. This fails to respect the applicant's right to know why personal and potentially sensitive information is being requested, violating principles of informed consent and transparency mandated by privacy laws. Another incorrect approach is to vaguely state that the questions are for the license without further detail. This is insufficient as it does not adequately inform the applicant about the specific use of their medical information, which is a critical component of their fitness to drive assessment by the SOC. This lack of specificity can lead to apprehension and distrust. A third incorrect approach is to imply that answering is mandatory without explaining the context or the applicant's rights. While certain information may be required for the license application, the manner of collection must be respectful and transparent. Failing to explain the purpose and potential consequences of withholding information or the implications of providing it can be perceived as coercive and ethically unsound. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a proactive approach to transparency. Before asking sensitive questions, they should always consider the applicant's perspective and their right to understand. A simple, clear explanation of the purpose of the information, how it will be used, and who will see it, is paramount. This aligns with ethical principles of respect for persons and adherence to regulatory requirements for data collection and privacy. If an applicant expresses discomfort or confusion, the professional should be prepared to offer further clarification or explore alternative means of obtaining necessary information, always within the bounds of SOC regulations. Question 15. Upon reviewing the rules of the road in Quebec, what is the most appropriate action a driver should take when they hear an emergency vehicle siren approaching from behind while driving on a two-lane road? Option A. Stop abruptly in the middle of the lane without pulling over. Option B. Continue driving at the same speed and direction until the intersection ahead is cleared. Option C. Safely pull over to the right side of the road and stop. Option D. Speed up to try and get through the intersection before the emergency vehicle. Correct answer is C. Safely pull over to the right side of the road and stop. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to demonstrate an understanding of how to react to unexpected and potentially hazardous situations on the road, specifically concerning the interaction with emergency vehicles. The ability to correctly identify and respond to a siren is a critical safety skill that directly impacts the applicant's ability to operate a vehicle safely and responsibly within Quebec's road network. Failure to respond appropriately can lead to dangerous situations for themselves, other road users, and the occupants of the emergency vehicle. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately and safely pulling over to the right side of the road and stopping. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the principles of road safety and the specific regulations governing the operation of vehicles in Quebec. The Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, mandates that drivers yield to emergency vehicles. Stopping on the right side of the road ensures that the path is cleared for the emergency vehicle to proceed without obstruction, minimizing any potential delays to its critical mission and preventing accidents. This action demonstrates a clear understanding of the driver's responsibility to prioritize the safe passage of emergency services. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves continuing to drive at the same speed and direction until the intersection is cleared. This is a regulatory failure because it obstructs the emergency vehicle, potentially delaying its arrival at an emergency scene. It also creates a significant safety hazard, as other drivers may not anticipate the presence of the emergency vehicle or the driver's failure to yield. Another incorrect approach is to speed up to try and get through the intersection before the emergency vehicle. This is a severe safety and regulatory failure. It demonstrates a lack of judgment and a disregard for the law and the safety of others. This action could lead to a collision with the emergency vehicle or other vehicles, and it directly violates the obligation to yield. A further incorrect approach is to stop abruptly in the middle of the lane without pulling over. This is a safety failure and a potential regulatory violation. While stopping is part of the correct response, doing so in the middle of the lane creates an obstruction and a hazard for the emergency vehicle and any vehicles following behind. It does not effectively clear the path as required. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first recognizing the auditory cue of the siren as an immediate signal to assess their surroundings. The decision-making process should prioritize safety and regulatory compliance. This involves identifying the direction of the siren, checking mirrors and blind spots for other traffic, and then executing the safest maneuver to yield the right-of-way. The core principle is to facilitate the unimpeded passage of emergency vehicles, which is a fundamental aspect of responsible driving in Quebec. Question 16. When evaluating their fitness to drive after taking a new prescription medication that lists drowsiness and blurred vision as potential side effects, what is the most responsible course of action for a driver in Quebec? Option A. Drive, but only for short distances and on familiar roads, believing this mitigates the risk associated with the side effects. Option B. Refrain from driving until they are certain the medication does not impair their ability to operate a vehicle safely. Option C. Drive, as the medication is legally prescribed and therefore assumed to be safe for all activities, including driving. Option D. Drive cautiously, assuming that the mild drowsiness and blurred vision will not significantly affect their driving performance. The correct answer is B. Refrain from driving until they are certain the medication does not impair their ability to operate a vehicle safely. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to make a critical decision under pressure that directly impacts public safety and their legal standing. The driver must accurately assess their physical and mental state, considering the potential impairment from medication, and understand the legal ramifications of operating a vehicle while potentially unfit. This requires a nuanced understanding of Quebec's Highway Safety Code and its implications for impaired driving, even when the impairment is not alcohol-related. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing safety and adhering strictly to the Quebec Highway Safety Code. This means recognizing that any medication that could impair driving ability, regardless of its legality or prescription status, necessitates refraining from driving. The driver must proactively assess their condition, consult their physician or pharmacist if unsure about the medication's effects on driving, and make the responsible decision to not drive if there is any doubt about their fitness. This aligns with the code's overarching goal of ensuring road safety and preventing accidents caused by impaired drivers. The code implicitly places the onus on the driver to be in a fit condition to operate a vehicle, and this includes being free from impairment due to medication. Incorrect approaches analysis. Choosing to drive despite experiencing drowsiness and blurred vision after taking prescription medication is a failure to comply with the spirit and letter of the Quebec Highway Safety Code. This approach disregards the potential for impaired judgment and reaction times, creating a significant risk to oneself and others. It is ethically irresponsible and legally precarious. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because the medication is prescribed, it is safe to drive. This overlooks the fact that even prescribed medications can have side effects that impair driving ability, and the driver has a duty to be aware of these potential effects. Relying solely on the fact that the medication is legal and prescribed, without considering its impact on driving performance, is a dangerous oversimplification. Finally, deciding to drive because the symptoms are mild or intermittent is also professionally unacceptable. Any level of impairment, however slight, can be sufficient to cause an accident. The code does not differentiate based on the severity of impairment when it comes to the fundamental requirement of being fit to drive. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must adopt a proactive and risk-averse approach when their actions could impact public safety. This involves a continuous assessment of their capabilities and adherence to relevant regulations. In the context of driving in Quebec, this means understanding that fitness to drive encompasses more than just sobriety. It includes being free from any impairment, whether from fatigue, illness, or medication. When in doubt, the safest and most responsible course of action is to err on the side of caution and avoid driving. This decision-making process should involve self-awareness, seeking expert advice when necessary, and prioritizing the well-being of oneself and the community above personal convenience. Question 17. The analysis reveals that a new driver in Quebec, holding a probationary license, has received a traffic infraction. Considering the graduated licensing system in Quebec, what is the most responsible and legally sound course of action for this driver to understand the immediate and potential future consequences of this infraction on their driving privileges? Option A. Ask friends who have also recently received traffic tickets for their experiences and advice on how to handle the situation. Option B. Assume that a single, minor infraction will not affect their probationary license and therefore take no further action. Option C. Ignore the infraction and hope that it will not be officially recorded or impact their driving record. Option D. Directly consult the official website and publications of the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, for information on demerit points and probationary license regulations. The correct answer is D. Directly consult the official website and publications of the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, for information on demerit points and probationary license regulations. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a new driver in Quebec is seeking to understand the implications of a recent traffic infraction on their probationary license. The situation is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to synthesize information about Quebec's specific graduated licensing system and its consequences for new drivers, balancing the need for clear understanding with the potential for anxiety or misinterpretation of rules. Careful judgment is required to ensure the information provided is accurate, relevant, and presented in a way that promotes responsible driving habits. The best approach involves directly consulting the official resources provided by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, regarding the demerit point system and its impact on probationary licenses. This is correct because the SOC is the sole authority responsible for administering driver licensing and traffic safety in Quebec. Their official guidelines and regulations are the definitive source of truth for understanding license suspension, demerit point accumulation, and the specific rules governing probationary licenses. Adhering to these official sources ensures compliance with Quebec's Highway Safety Code and promotes informed decision-making by the driver. An incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal advice from friends or online forums. This is professionally unacceptable because such sources are not authoritative and may contain outdated, inaccurate, or misinterpreted information. Relying on unverified advice could lead the driver to believe they are in compliance when they are not, potentially resulting in further penalties or even driving while suspended, which is a serious offense under Quebec law. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that the infraction will have no impact because it was a minor offense. This is professionally unacceptable as Quebec's demerit point system applies to all traffic infractions. An accumulation of points, regardless of perceived severity, can lead to consequences for probationary license holders. The Highway Safety Code does not differentiate based on a driver's subjective assessment of an infraction's minor nature when it comes to demerit point accumulation. A final incorrect approach would be to ignore the infraction and hope it is forgotten. This is professionally unacceptable as traffic infractions are recorded and tracked by the SOC. Ignoring the issue does not make it disappear, and can lead to a buildup of demerit points, potentially resulting in license suspension without the driver being aware of the accumulating consequences. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes consulting official regulatory bodies for information pertaining to licensing and traffic laws. This involves identifying the relevant governing authority, in this case, the SOC, seeking out their official publications or website, and applying that information directly to the specific situation. When in doubt, seeking clarification directly from the SOC is the most responsible course of action. Question 18. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new driver applicant in Quebec is highly motivated to obtain their license quickly, expressing confidence in their ability to drive safely and promising to be a responsible road user. Considering the paramount importance of public safety and the regulatory framework of the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC, what is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing examiner? Option A. Focus primarily on the applicant's theoretical understanding of traffic rules, deeming practical demonstration less critical if they can articulate the laws correctly. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive practical driving assessment to objectively evaluate the applicant's skills and knowledge of Quebec's traffic laws, ensuring they meet all safety standards before issuing a license. Option C. Expedite the licensing process based on the applicant's assurances of future carefulness, bypassing a full practical evaluation to accommodate their eagerness. Option D. Permit a licensed family member accompanying the applicant to co-sign or vouch for their driving ability during the examination process. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive practical driving assessment to objectively evaluate the applicant's skills and knowledge of Quebec's traffic laws, ensuring they meet all safety standards before issuing a license. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the paramount importance of public safety and adherence to Quebec's road safety laws. The applicant's eagerness and potential lack of full understanding of the risks involved necessitate a rigorous and ethical assessment process by the examiner, ensuring that only qualified individuals are licensed. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and objective evaluation of the applicant's driving skills and knowledge of Quebec's traffic laws, as mandated by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC. This includes assessing their ability to operate a vehicle safely in various conditions, their understanding of road signs and signals, and their adherence to speed limits and right-of-way rules. The examiner must ensure the applicant demonstrates competence and a commitment to safe driving practices, which is the fundamental purpose of the driver's licensing process in Quebec. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to expedite the licensing process based on the applicant's expressed enthusiasm and assurances of future carefulness, without a comprehensive practical assessment. This fails to uphold the SOC mandate to ensure public safety and could result in an unqualified driver operating a vehicle, posing a significant risk to themselves and others. It bypasses the essential verification of practical driving ability. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the applicant's theoretical knowledge of traffic rules, neglecting the practical demonstration of safe driving maneuvers. Theoretical knowledge is crucial. It does not guarantee safe execution in real-world driving situations. This approach would not adequately assess the applicant's ability to react to unexpected events or navigate complex traffic scenarios, thereby compromising safety. A further incorrect approach would be to allow a family member or friend to supervise the applicant during the test, even if they are experienced drivers. Quebec's driver testing regulations require the presence of a certified examiner to ensure impartiality and adherence to standardized evaluation criteria. External supervision, even with good intentions, introduces bias and deviates from the established testing protocol, undermining the integrity of the licensing process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes public safety above all else. This involves a commitment to the regulatory requirements of the SOC, maintaining objectivity throughout the assessment, and ensuring that all licensing decisions are based on verifiable evidence of competence and adherence to the law. When faced with applicant pressure or perceived urgency, the professional must firmly adhere to established procedures, recognizing that the licensing process is a critical gatekeeper for road safety in Quebec. Question 19. Implementation of the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec (SOC) licensing process in Quebec requires strict adherence to documentation protocols. If an applicant for a driver's license presents with incomplete proof of identity and residency, what is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Accept the application with a verbal promise from the applicant to submit the missing documents within a week. Option B. Accept photocopies of identification and utility bills as sufficient proof of identity and residency, even if original documents are not presented. Option C. Allow the applicant to proceed with a temporary license while the documentation is being processed, based on their assurance of future compliance. Option D. Politely inform the applicant of the specific missing documents required by SOC regulations, and advise them to return once all necessary documentation is provided. The correct answer is D. Politely inform the applicant of the specific missing documents required by SOC regulations and advise them to return once all necessary documentation is provided. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and ethical obligations to ensure public safety. The applicant's incomplete documentation presents a direct conflict between facilitating access to services and upholding the integrity of the licensing process, as mandated by Quebec's Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec (SOC) regulations. Careful judgment is required to avoid both undue leniency and unnecessary obstruction. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves adhering strictly to the SOC established procedures for verifying identity and residency. This means requiring the applicant to provide the missing documentation before proceeding with the license application. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the SOC mandate to ensure that only eligible individuals are granted driver's licenses, thereby upholding public safety and the legal framework governing road use in Quebec. Failure to verify documentation could lead to fraudulent licensing, which is a direct contravention of SOC regulations and a serious ethical lapse. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to accept the application with the understanding that the applicant will submit the missing documents later. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses a critical verification step mandated by SOC regulations. It creates a loophole that could be exploited and undermines the reliability of the licensing system. Ethically, it prioritizes expediency over safety and regulatory compliance. Another incorrect approach is to deny the application outright without clearly explaining the specific documentation requirements and offering guidance on how to obtain them. While adherence to regulations is paramount, a professional approach also involves assisting applicants within the bounds of the law. This approach fails to uphold the principle of providing clear information and support to citizens seeking to comply with legal requirements. A further incorrect approach is to accept alternative, unverified forms of identification or residency proof. This is a direct violation of SOC regulations, which specify acceptable forms of documentation. Such an action compromises the integrity of the licensing process and opens the door to potential fraud, directly contravening the SOC responsibility to ensure all licensed drivers meet the established criteria. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance, ethical conduct, and customer service. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the specific documentation requirements outlined by the SOC. 2. Clearly communicating these requirements to the applicant, explaining why they are necessary. 3. Providing the applicant with a reasonable opportunity and clear instructions on how to obtain the missing documentation. 4. Only proceeding with the application once all required documents have been verified according to SOC standards. This systematic approach ensures both adherence to the law and a professional, helpful interaction with the applicant. Question 20. To address the challenge of demonstrating understanding of distance and time calculations for safe driving in Quebec, a driver applicant completed a test route consisting of 3 segments. The first segment was 50 km long and took 45 minutes. The second segment was 75 km long and took 1 hour and 15 minutes. The third segment was 60 km long and took 1 hour. What was the applicant's average speed in kilometers per hour km/h for the entire route? Option A, 60 km/h. Option B, 75 km/h. Option C, 70 km/h. Option D, 65 km/h. The correct answer is D, 65 km/h. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to accurately calculate the total distance traveled and the average speed, demonstrating a practical understanding of road rules and physics relevant to safe driving in Quebec. Miscalculations could indicate a lack of attention to detail or an inability to apply learned concepts, which are critical for safe operation of a vehicle. The challenge lies in translating real-world driving conditions into mathematical computations that adhere to the standards set by the Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec, SOC. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves accurately calculating the total distance by summing the individual segments of the journey, and then dividing this total distance by the total time taken to determine the average speed. This method directly addresses the core requirements of the question by applying the fundamental formula for average speed. Average speed equals total distance/total time. This aligns with the SOC emphasis on practical application of knowledge and understanding of vehicle dynamics, ensuring drivers can comprehend and manage their travel parameters. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to average the speeds of each segment without considering the duration of each segment. This fails to account for the fact that longer durations at a particular speed contribute more to the overall average speed than shorter durations, violates the definition of average speed, and would lead to an inaccurate result. Another incorrect approach would be to calculate the total time by summing the times and then dividing the sum of the individual distances by this total time, but incorrectly calculating the total time itself. For example, if the times were given in hours and minutes, and the conversion to a single unit, like hours, was done improperly, the final average speed calculation would be flawed. This demonstrates a lack of precision in unit conversion, a critical skill for accurate mathematical application. A further incorrect approach would be to calculate the average of the speeds of each segment and then multiply by the total distance. This fundamentally misunderstands the relationship between speed, distance, and time. Speed is a rate, and averaging rates, without considering the time over which they occur, is mathematically unsound for determining overall average speed. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such problems by first breaking down the journey into its constituent parts. They should then meticulously calculate the total distance and total time, ensuring all units are consistent. The application of the correct formula for average speed should follow, with a final review of the calculation to ensure accuracy and logical consistency with the problem's parameters. This systematic approach minimizes errors and ensures compliance with the practical knowledge expected by the SOC.